Most companies don't break because of a bad strategy. They break because growth arrives before the leadership does. You land the big contract, you open a new location, you acquire a new company, and suddenly you're standing there realizing you need 3 leaders that you don't have. So you promote the person who's been there the longest, even though they're not quite ready. Or you go outside and bring someone in who doesn't know the culture. Or, and this is the most common one, you just absorb it yourself. You add it to your plate and tell yourself it's temporary, and then you wonder 6 months later why you're exhausted. None of those work long term. I know this because I've tried all 3. So in this video, I want to show you how we build a leadership bench inside our portfolio companies before we even need it. Because the bench you build today is what determines whether growth accelerates you or breaks you. And there's a very specific way to do it that most founders never learn until it's too late. I operate across a portfolio of 9 companies through Sandbox Resources, and we provide consolidated services, the systems, the leadership, the infrastructure, and the operating support across all of them. At that level, you cannot afford to make bench building an afterthought. I have watched companies move fast because the right people were ready. And I've also watched companies stall, or worse, decline because they weren't. The difference was never the market, it was always the people readiness. Here's the thing about building a leadership bench that most founders will get backwards. They think about it the moment they need it. A key person leaves, an opportunity shows up faster than expected, a role outgrows the person in it, and suddenly there's a scramble. Who do we promote? Who do we hire? Who can hold this thing together? That scramble is expensive. Not just financially, it's expensive in momentum, in culture, in trust, because people on your team are watching how you handle the pressure. And a panicked leadership decision tells them a lot about whether this is a company they want to grow with. Building the bench isn't a luxury for companies that have figured everything else. It's actually a survival strategy for companies that are still in the building phase. And it starts much earlier and much more simply than most people think. So the first step is the one that requires the most honesty. Look at your team right now and ask yourself, who solves problems without being asked? Who holds the standard when I'm not in the room? Who do other people on the team naturally go to? And who gets better when the pressure increases, not worse? Those are your bench candidates. They may not have a title yet. They may not have all the experience yet, but they have the instincts, and instincts are what you develop. So write their names down right now. If you can't name 2 or 3 people, that is your most important business problem today. Not your marketing strategy, not your systems, not your next hire. It's this, because you cannot build a bench you haven't identified. Step 2 is where most companies fail. They identify good people and then they leave them exactly where they are until a crisis forces a decision. And I understand why. I've done it. You're busy. They're performing well in their current role. Moving them feels like a risk when things are already working. But here's what happens when you wait. The good ones, they get restless. They stop seeing a path forward. They start having conversations that you're not a part of. And then one day they come to you with a decision that's already been made. Real bench building is intentional. It's not a series of reactive promotions. It looks more like giving someone a stretch assignment, something slightly above their current level, like including them in a decision, not to vote, but to watch how that decision gets made. Debriefing them afterwards and asking, what did you see? What did you do differently? What are you taking away from this? Giving them a small team to lead, even temporarily, so that they experience what it actually feels like. Now, you're not promoting them yet, you're developing them. And that distinction matters because a promotion without development is just a faster way to lose a good person. So in step 3, this is where you really need to define the role before you fill it. It's the step that most founders skip entirely, and it's the one that causes the most pain when it's missing. So before you put someone into a leadership role, you need to define what that role actually requires. What decisions are they going to own? What numbers will they be accountable to? And what does success look like in that first 90 days? Where do they have full authority? And where do they need to come to me? If you can't answer those questions clearly, you're not ready to promote someone. And more importantly, they're not going to be set up to succeed. I have seen this play out so many times. A great person gets promoted into a vague role with no scorecard. They're doing their best, but they don't actually know what success looks like. And then 6 months later, everyone's frustrated. The leader, the team, the founder, and the assumption becomes that the person wasn't ready. And you know what? Sometimes that's true. But more often, it's that the role wasn't ready. A clear role with a clear scorecard is what turns a strong employee into a real leader. Without it, you've given someone a title and a problem, and that's not fair to them. So in step 4, this is where we install the standard before the person. And this one is less obvious, but it might be the most important. The standard has to exist before the leader does. What does this team believe? How do we treat each other when things get hard? How do we handle conflict? Do we go direct or do we avoid? What do we do when we make a mistake? What does accountability look like here? And what does it not look like? If the answers to those questions only exist in your head, they leave when you do. Your new leader inherits a culture vacuum, and they fill it with whatever they have, which may or may not be what you were building. So install the standard first. Write it down, talk about it, make it visible. Then put your leader into it. Now they're not creating culture from scratch. They're actually protecting something that already exists, and that's a job that they can actually win. I want to say this part directly because it doesn't get talked about enough. An empty bench is one of the most expensive invisible costs in a growing company. And I know this, I've been there. It's the good people who have quietly left because they can't see a path forward. It's the founder who hasn't taken a vacation in 3 years because there's no one to hold it together. It's the acquisition you pass on because you don't have the leadership to absorb it. And it's the ceiling you hit not because the market ran out, but because the organization ran out of leaders. And here's the part that's the hardest to sit with. Your highest performers feel an empty bench. They feel the weight of a company that's depending on too few people. They feel a gap where leadership should be. And they just don't say it out loud until they do, and by then they're already on their way out. If this is something you're navigating right now, share it with another founder or operator in your world, because these are the conversations that move companies forwards. Also, subscribe, because next week I'm going to get into something that makes the bench work even when you're not there. How to build systems that don't depend on you, and why that process is actually how you develop your best leaders.